Your brain wants to minimize the amount of time and energy it spends thinking about things. And to do this, your brain relies on habits. Let me tell you more. Hi, I'm Chris. I'm a doctor. I've read this book, BookTube. I'm summarizing it for you now. You see, there's this trade-off between effort and accuracy. And really what your brain wants to do is never spend more energy and time than something's actually worth. And a habit is a shortcut that can do that because you can do things on autopilot. But a habit is clearly not without problems, because one of the most difficult things that you as a person can do is actually prioritize something that's desirable, particularly if it's in the future, over something that could give immediate gratification now. If you look at the marshmallow experiment that gave evidence of the benefits of delayed gratification, if you look at that on another light, it actually just shows how difficult it is putting off immediate action. And at times you learn how much effort you need to put into a certain experience. And in these situations, you can find that at other times you put in too little effort and then fail. And that kind of failure is actually arguably fine, because it then gives you the balance in future to make that trade-off more accurately and say, how much effort do I need to put into this particular situation? Obviously, it may be more if you failed on the first time. Talking about failure, you have to think about a good way to fail. And in life, you've got many competing interests. You've perhaps got work or school, you've got family, you've got hobbies, you've got friends, you've got other commitments taking up your time. And if you can unsystematically fail, you may be able to achieve many of your goals and satisfy lots of your different avenues that you need to commit effort to. However, if you don't, and you always make sure that one of these suffers, i.e. fail in a systematic way, then you won't be achieving your goals. So for example, if you'd arranged to meet somebody at work, your child is sick, then you had to take them to the doctor, you perhaps failed at work because you haven't met the client, but you prioritized your family. Equally then, sometimes you have a work deadline and you can't make a school performance. You prioritized your work over the child. But if, however, always you're prioritizing work over exercise, you'll find it will not be beneficial. So just bear that in mind. When it comes to goals, I love them. But what actually is a goal? Well, a goal is an end state that provides a focus for your motivational energy. And the goal can either be a desirable state that you would like to bring about, or an undesirable state that you want to avoid. And when a goal has some amount of arousal behind it, you could refer to this as an active goal. So I'm actively trying to make YouTube content now. That's one of my goals. And a goal that has only a small amount of motivational energy, you could perhaps perceive this as being less active and not strongly aroused. And in essence, the more active you have a goal, the more influence it has over what you're actually going to do. And what we'd often say is, if a goal has no energy around it, that would be a dormant goal. So some motivational speakers actually primarily focus on getting you motivational energy or goal arousal. Let's do this, and energize you. Whereas others spend their focus more on what you actually want to do. How would you define your goals? And make you consider, explore these and think, how would you then break your goal down into small achievements to actually satisfy it? Clearly, you really need to do both. But motivational speakers are there and can give you that top up if you need them. what we would find is that there's a consistent mapping between environment and your behavior, and it actually crosses many facets of your life, because most actual products are designed to create consistency. Take your smartphone, you know where the apps are. If somebody were to take it off you, jumble everything up, it would be a headache. You would have to use mental energy to use it rather than just almost an autopilot. So there's 4 actions of a habit. Firstly, not being aware of what has triggered it to start. Second, you can perform a habit whilst actually putting effort into something else. Third, it can be disrupted by changing the environment, and that's key if you want to change your habits. And fourth, you can carry out such behaviors mindlessly, and then you may actually have no memory of doing this. So habits create a direct relationship between a state of the world and a behavior, and as a result, habits are the most efficient way for people to multitask, because you can type and think at the same time, because you've got typing as a habit. Habits you can do mindlessly, so you can actually be performed whilst doing something that you need to have deliberate attention to. And habits are enabled by what this book refers to as the go system and halted by the stop system. Let me tell you some more. The go system is incredibly efficient at helping you adhere and achieve your goals. It focuses you on the information that you need to succeed, and it actually makes you almost like a blinkered. You get to ignore things that will distract you from success. But there's a cost to this efficiency, because once that habit is ingrained, it can then be very hard to stop yourself from carrying out the wishes of the go system. Even if you decide, look, I no longer want to do that, the go system will keep trying to push you to do this. And an interesting experiment was mentioned in which people, one cohort, they were all smokers, and some, I think it was in Germany, were allowed to smoke, others couldn't. And then they had a raffle afterwards, and they said people would bet or put bids in, and they found that the people who actually hadn't smoked and the prize was cigarettes, they would pay more to try and win that prize than they would to pay for a prize that was just money, that you could have bought the same quantity of cigarettes, whereas those that had had their nicotine craving satisfied actually didn't do that, because the brain is focusing on what it actually wants there. The stop system, however, is much less effective than the go system, and it requires mental effort, and you have to be able to pay attention to what is going on around you to recognize that it's something that you want to avoid. And you also have to engage energy to stop this behavior, and as a result, habits have that advantage over the stop system, because they can be done without effort, and the stop system takes effort. And even if you manage to stop a behavior, this go system is persistent. It uses cravings to actually remind you that you have an active goal and that what you want to achieve. And this craving, it's an unpleasant feeling that is associated with some kind of need or desire. So what can be done about this? Well, to put your long-term goals on an equal footing with your short-term, you need to think about a plan. You need to recast the activities that will pay off for you in the long run in terms of specific goals that you can achieve on a daily basis that will ultimately lead you to long-term success. Even after you've started performing actions that you want to do and move you to the long-term goal, the competing short-term goal has not gone away. That may be the habit that you're trying to stop, because existing habits that are appropriate for your environment still will be engaging you. And when you return to that environment, they'll continue to influence your actions. So existing habits and old environments, you think of when somebody is perhaps released from prison, having had a drug problem. If they go back to their old environment, then they may actually be at quite a high risk of relapse, in part because there's so many environmental triggers. Behavior change is difficult. We all know that. And another thing that is difficult, another reason, is because life's already busy. You only have finite amount of time, energy, money, and when you try and add a new desired behavior into your life, you need to divert resources to actually help that, to go towards that goal. And, as a result, you really need to carefully plan so that you can deal with these conflicts, preferably in advance. So smart change is what the book summarizes this as, this concept, and it's trying to find ways to influence old habits and actually up the arousal of the new desired behavior and minimize the arousal of previous goals or behaviors. And often it's over time. It's an accumulation of individual days and particular actions that actually leads to progress. So to change your behavior, there's 5 crucial steps in which the motivational systems in your brain need to be impacted. And these would be optimizing your goals, taming the go system, harnessing the stop system, manage your environment, and engage with others. I'll tell you more about these 5 things. So what you want to do is describe goals that are specific enough to allow them to actually be engaged, that have outcomes attached, and set goals that will sustain behavior in the long run. There's no point in having a short-term success. It's about long-term achievements here. And identifying both the broad contribution you want to make as well as narrow achievements that will get you there. And you have to be aware, with great intention, circumstances almost always change. So be flexible and develop an implementation intention with specific plans. Create these plans in advance so that when an obstacle comes up, you've already thought of a strategy to potentially overcome that. And ensure your goals are energized. No matter how good your plan is, if you do not get yourself aroused, you'll not do anything. So the evidence is fairly clear that making lots of changes at the same time is a recipe for disaster and failure. So really what you have to do is think, how many changes am I wanting to make? What is the most important one? Focus your energy on achieving the most important change to you. And when that's been achieved, and I wish you all great success in achieving these, then you think, well, let's go back and focus on the other behaviors that perhaps I want to gain or I want to stop doing. So is there a correlation between state of arousal and performance at achieving goals? Well, according to researchers Yerkes Dodson, who made a curve and named it after themselves, there is. And that's in essence an upside down U with arousal along here and performance here. So if you've got too little arousal, I can't be bothered to do it, you won't start work on the goal. Too much arousal, and again it's low down because you have difficulty focusing and breaking down the tasks. So the optimum amount is a good level, medium arousal we'll call it, in which you'll be working towards your goals effectively. If you're somebody who's usually has a high level of arousal, you may want to break your tasks down into particular steps and also try to perhaps forward plan things so that when you get the pressure of the deadline, you don't feel it's too much. Whereas if you're a low arousal person, your major problem's getting started. Therefore, you need to ramp up the perceived importance of the goal to make you actually start working on it. And you may also benefit from people who have a high level of arousal because they'll give you some motivation to start work. And really, you could set yourself early deadlines to ensure you don't leave big projects to the last minute. So ultimately, we want to redirect the go system so that the new behavior that we want to have becomes the new habit. And before the new behavior is a habit, we need to energize the goal. If an undesired behavior is energized, you have to find ways to calm this so you don't give in to temptation of the old behavior. And you may want to write plans in a journal to try and think, how would this occur? Or have a kind of implementation plan that you could write down, and potentially you could use this to energize new behaviors by keep repeating them until a habit starts to actually emerge. It's clearly helpful to create distance to minimize temptation, and also it's worth pointing out, if somebody's tired or stressed, they're more likely to give in to temptation. There's a great story that does relate to temptation about Odysseus. And Odysseus was really curious to hear the song of the sirens, these beautiful creatures. But the song lured sailors towards the island, so they actually all crashed against the rocks and drowned. Now, Odysseus came in with a plan. He got his fellow sailors to put beeswax in their ears so they couldn't actually hear, and then also tie their hands to the oars so they wouldn't let go. And they tied him also to the mast so he could actually hear, and he would then plead with them. He'd say, let me go closer, go me closer. But they followed the instructions that he'd set before, and he got to hear the song without crashing into rocks. So this is important because it makes a few points very tangible. One of them is keeping things at a distance. If you're far away from this beautiful singing rock creature that's going to lure you to your death, it doesn't have as much impact. It's only when you're much closer. And then the temptation becomes harder. And also, if you can manage to resist something by a plan, your own efforts, and the efforts of other people, temptation will likely subside, and then you'll be able to get further away from it again and carry on. Another example is when you go shopping. If you go with a plan, i.e. a shopping list, when you're not hungry and thirsty, you may actually come back with some nice, healthy and nutritious food that you plan to eat. If you just go in aimlessly when you're hungry, then enjoy your donuts. Let me tell you about the what the hell effect. This is when an initial small failure turns into a monumental failure. You not only fail, but you do so spectacularly. And failing like this, potentially, even when you have a long-term plan, can cause bad repercussions, and then you can go back to your old behavior. And one thing you may think is, well, if I have protected values, that's inherently wrong, I won't do that. It may protect you against this, but not really, because if you think something is so wrong, and then you may then therefore not make a plan, what if that happens? How would I avoid it? So although you may feel uncomfortable making a plan to avoid a particular scenario, it can be beneficial. And the other thing, if you have your kind of protracted values in which they're things that you think, this is something I wouldn't do, and you've got a line in the sand, and then you try and strengthen your stop system to say, look, I'm not going to do it. You almost turn this into a war, and you're not willing to accept trade-offs, compromise, and then any small failure could potentially be magnified. So instead, try and treat failure as part of the process of behavior change. Realize that a series of successes, punctuated perhaps by the occasional failure, is still moving you slowly towards your goal. So just take the long view. So your stop system, it's not fixed. If you adopt a kind of growth mindset towards your stop system, then you can actually improve this. If you treat it like a skill that you can develop, becoming better at overcoming temptations, rather than some people who think they've got a kind of fixed mindset of your stop system can only do too much. You can train it. However, even the strongest of stop systems will fail if you continuously test it and tax it. So with any attempt to change your behavior, there's this tendency to focus on your own psychological characteristics. Remembering the new behavior, internalizing your defenses to avoid temptation, spending time inwards thinking about how you'll change yourself. However, there's a whole world out there, and successful behavior change also requires you looking outward, because your environment is a powerful driver of what you may actually do. So, for example, you're likely to remember to brush your teeth twice a day. In part, that is because your toothbrush is prominently displayed above your sink. However, you may not remember to floss your teeth as regularly. And this is because the floss may be in the medicine cabinet that we've all got with a mirror on one side. Or it may be just hidden in the corner. So you're not prompted by seeing it. That good visual reminder isn't there. So with behavior change, if you commit to a person, you're more likely to see it through than just committing to a group. So organizations like Alcoholics Anonymous use this fact by having you to get a sponsor as well as group support. Thinking about others and behavior change, you can put them into 3 categories: family, strangers and neighbours. Now, family are important. You may see them regularly, or you may just have a close bond with them. Ideally, you want them to help support you with your new behaviours that you're trying to adopt. Be aware they may not want to. In part, they may see as what you did and what you're trying to change as part of you, as an intrinsic value of you, so then you'd be a different person and they don't believe that would happen. Or you may have actually already used all their goodwill and broken many promises, particularly if you've had issues with addiction. Strangers, these are people you don't know, and you really should try and select them wisely. Often a stranger would have a kind of transactional interaction with, i.e. I'll pay you to do this, or you pay me to do this. But if you can get strangers who share the same kind of desired goals, or they perhaps have the background that resonates with you and they're trying to go where you want to go, they can be really useful for behavior change. Finally, neighbours. And for the point of view of this, neighbours includes your friends. And they're people who could really help. And in part, it's actually because you don't want to look bad in front of these people. So you don't want to have a dark light shone on you. Therefore, you'll reinforce your good behavior. But it is fundamental that you are not friends with people and you actively avoid people who are exhibiting qualities that you don't want. And that is important. So why are you similar to your friends, you may ask? I think the same as my friends, you may say. Well, firstly, most human brains are wired the same. They function very similarly, even if you have a completely different personality. However, the effect of environment is important. But it isn't just the environment, because you may be in the same environment as your close friends, but how you interact with the world, how you see it through that particular lens, is often how your friends would see it as well. Therefore, that's why you're similar to your friends. Once knowledge has entered into your system, it's actually difficult to remove. There's no mechanism to just delete it. And when you have a reason to mistrust people, it actually engages your stop system. It shifts you from the kind of autopilot doing mode to a thinking mode. So when you enter into that thinking mode, you're prone to then avoid action. And a lack of trust almost has the same effect as on your behavior as negative emotions like disgust. So feedback. There's ways of giving good feedback to encourage others to have good sustained behavior change. And this would be focusing on the process goals, not the outcome goals. For example, the comments you make to others affect the way they characterize their goals. It's common to want to talk to people about the progress they're making towards a goal, particularly if you know they're working on it. However, if you have a discussion and it focuses mainly on them reaching a certain end state, then they will themselves in turn develop an outcome goal, not a process goal. Then it'll reinforce the kind of need to get to the outcome and then potentially stop. And it'll omit the long-term kind of desired contribution that you want to have ongoing behavior change. So the classic example would relate to weight loss. You look great, and then you would say, how did you achieve it? And it would make the person think, what steps did they take to achieve this? And then they'll be more thinking about the process rather than just the outcome. That great, you can fit into that dress again. And potentially you could reinforce their growth mindset. Let me leave you with one final comment. First, thanks for getting this far. It's a long video. You're certainly in the minority. But the only path to lasting behavior change comes from allowing the Go system to engage a new set of goals at the expense of undesired old ones. I'll see you next time. This is when you have a small initial failure which turns into a momental failure, So to change your behavior, there's quite a few things to influence. All of the aspects of your motivational system. That was rubbish. Also, cars, musical instruments, computers. I was almost going to sound like electrical tin openers, but you know, you'd have to have watched Trainspotting to get that gag. Less exciting. If you're somebody who has naturally low arousal, your major problem is actually getting started on the work. And for that, you need to ramp up the importance of the goal. But the key is, when somebody actually learns parkour, they exploit small footprints in the environment that they... Whoa! What was that? Was that somebody knocking at the window? That's scary, man. Let's go back to the story. It's just you and me here.